Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, never intending it for the world, that the impediment to action advances action. That what stands in the way becomes the way. He was an emperor. He was also a man who carried immense weight in silence, who served relentlessly, and who had to learn, painfully, that virtue without self-governance is not virtue at all, it is self-destruction wearing a noble mask. There are people among us who live this quietly every single day. They are not emperors, but they carry kingdoms inside them. And one day, with no announcement, no argument, no farewell, they simply stop. Not because they gave up. Because the Stoics were right, endurance without wisdom is just suffering. And suffering without purpose serves no one. Lesson 1. Know what is yours to carry, and what is not. The Stoics built their entire philosophy on a single, radical distinction: what is within our control, and what is not. Epictetus, born a slave, a man who had every external freedom stripped from him, taught that the only true possession any person holds is their own judgment, their own will, their own response to the world. Deeply feeling people often violate this principle not out of weakness, but out of misplaced devotion. They absorb the anxiety of a friend, the anger of a stranger, the grief of a room, as though carrying it will somehow lighten it for others. But the Stoics would say plainly, another person's emotional state is not your burden to bear. You may witness it with compassion. You may respond with care. But you are not obligated to dissolve yourself into it. The moment you learn to distinguish between empathy and absorption, you begin to reclaim the one thing that was always yours, your inner equilibrium. Lesson 2. Endurance is not the same as virtue, know the difference. The Stoics revered endurance. Seneca wrote that we should rehearse hardship, that discomfort strengthens the soul. But there is a critical distinction the modern world collapses too easily: endurance in service of something meaningful is noble. Endurance in service of being needed, of earning approval, of avoiding conflict, that is not discipline. That is fear wearing the armor of selflessness. For years, the deeply compassionate person endures. They tell themselves it is strength. They tell themselves it is love. But Stoic philosophy demands honest self-examination above all else. Ask yourself, am I continuing because this is virtuous, or because I have never learned to stop? Seneca wrote, "It is not that I am brave. It is that I know what deserves my energy." Pouring yourself endlessly into those who do not reciprocate is not bravery. It is a failure of discernment. And discernment, clear-eyed, honest, unflinching, is one of the highest Stoic virtues. Lesson 3. The body speaks when the mind refuses to listen to it. The Stoics were not advocates of numbness. They did not say feel nothing. They said, understand what you feel, trace it to its source, and do not let it govern you unconsciously. When the chest tightens before a conversation. When sleep becomes elusive. When a gathering of people who once brought warmth now feels like entering a storm, these are not signs of weakness. They are the body's philosophical argument. They are proof that something is misaligned between the life being lived and the values being held. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily in his journal not to perform wisdom, but to practice it, to examine himself with radical honesty before the day demanded anything of him. If he were alive today, he might say this: the exhaustion you are carrying is not an accident. It is information. It is the accumulated evidence of a life spent giving without governance. Do not silence it. Study it. Then act accordingly. Lesson 4. Withdrawal is not retreat, it is the discipline of return. When the compassionate person finally steps back, the world calls it coldness. The Stoics would call it reason. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, taught that the wise person acts with intention, not reaction. They do not scatter their energy across every demand the world places before them. They conserve, they deliberate, they choose. Pulling away from relationships that have become one-sided, from conversations that cost everything and return nothing, from environments that erode the self, this is not abandonment. It is the exercise of rational self-governance. The general who retreats to regroup does not lose the war. He preserves the forces necessary to continue it. When you create distance from what depletes you, you are not running. You are practicing the most fundamental Stoic act, returning to yourself, so that when you re-engage with the world, you do so whole, not hollowed. Lesson 5. Silence is not emptiness, it is where philosophy lives. Marcus Aurelius did not write the Meditations for publication. He wrote them alone, in silence, on campaign, in the small hours before the demands of empire resumed. He wrote to think, to hold himself accountable, to return, again and again, to what mattered. When the exhausted and deeply feeling person retreats into silence, they are, perhaps without knowing it, doing exactly what the great Stoics prescribed. In the absence of noise, the real questions surface. What do I actually value? Which of my relationships nourish my capacity to live well? Which have quietly been feeding on it? Silence is not a wound. It is the condition under which honest thinking becomes possible. And honest thinking, the unflinching examination of one's own life, is, according to Epictetus, the only path to genuine freedom. Not freedom from difficulty. Freedom from being at the mercy of what you have never examined. Lesson 6. Self-preservation is not selfishness, it is the precondition of service. There is a persistent and damaging myth, particularly for those who feel deeply, that placing your own well-being before others' demands is a moral failure. The Stoics rejected this entirely. Seneca wrote that a person who is at war with themselves cannot be at peace with anyone else. You cannot offer genuine care from a place of depletion. You cannot give steadily from a vessel that has been allowed to run dry. True Stoic virtue is not occasional and exhausting, it is sustainable and consistent. The philosopher who tends to their own mind, who governs their own reactions, who preserves their own capacity for reason and compassion, that person serves the world far more effectively than the one who martyrs themselves for every request. Protecting your energy is not a retreat from virtue. It is the foundation on which virtue can actually stand. Lesson 7. Amor Fati, love even the cost of who you are becoming. Nietzsche borrowed this idea from the Stoics, amor fati, love of fate. Not resigned acceptance, but active embrace. The exhaustion you carried for years was not wasted. The relationships that took more than they gave were not meaningless. Every moment of invisible labor, every silent act of care, every time you absorbed someone else's storm, it shaped you into someone of uncommon depth. The Stoic does not look back with bitterness. They look back with understanding. You were not foolish to care so much. You were learning, slowly and at great cost, the most important lesson philosophy offers, that a life of virtue requires not just compassion for others, but justice toward yourself. And now you know. Now you carry that knowledge not as a wound, but as wisdom. And wisdom, hard-won, honestly earned, is the one possession no external force can ever take from you. A closing word from one student of life to another. The Stoics did not promise comfort. They promised something rarer and more lasting, clarity. The kind that comes when you stop running from yourself and begin, at last, to govern the one domain that was always yours, your own mind, your own choices, your own inner life. If this spoke to something in you today, to the part of you that has been giving without governance, enduring without wisdom, caring without boundaries, then perhaps this is your moment of clarity. Not a dramatic turning point. Just a quiet, honest recognition: I deserve the same care I have always given so freely to others. Thank you for staying until the end. Truly. The fact that you are here means you are already asking the questions that matter most. Keep asking them until next time. Stay disciplined, stay grounded, and stay free.